So this week's Torah portion is Toldot, which Noah and his family are going to chant tomorrow morning. And it begins with one of the most intimate and emotionally complex family narratives in the entire Torah. And that is saying a lot, because there are a lot of complex and emotional family narratives in the book of Genesis alone. It's a story about two children, Jacob and Esau, who enter the world already struggling with each other. Parents who love them but fail to understand them, and a reconciliation that arrives only after decades of distance and pain. That's not in this parsha, but it's coming. Spoiler alert. At the beginning of the parsha, there is a small line that carries an enormous lesson. V'yagidlu hana'arim, when the boys grew up. The Torah says almost nothing about that time before that, about the moment before that moment that Jacob and Esau, except that they struggled together even in their mother's womb, and that one was red and hairy, and that Jacob was grasping at his heel, hence the name Yaakov. Nothing is mentioned about their early years. Nothing is said about how they were raised, about their character, their desires. And so when there is a void, the rabbis fill that with midrash. And so from this, the rabbis conclude that these two fraternal twins were raised by their parents, Isaac and Rebekah, were raised almost without any, if perhaps no, differentiation between them. They're raised exactly the same. The Midrash Jewish folklore asserts that later conflict between the brothers all stems from Isaac and Rebekah's failure to understand and to nurture each child's unique character. The Midrash says, they did not train each child according to his own nature, which led to hatred between them. And then Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, a 19th century Torah commentator, is even more explicit in blaming the parents for all the troubles between these two boys. He says, the striking contrast in the grandsons of Abraham may have been due not so much to a difference in their temperaments as to a mistake in their upbringing. Both were given the same instruction and care. No attention was paid to their differences. Hirsch concludes that Isaac and Rebekah gave the boys only one educational style, failing to match the unique emotional, spiritual, and psychological needs of each of their children. The parents assumed that fairness meant sameness, and they did not notice early enough that each child needed something different from them. Proverbs teaches, raise a child according to their own path. And the Torah is reminding us that children grow best when they are understood as individuals, with their own personalities, their own challenges, and their own gifts. So beneath the surface of all of this lies a single spiritual thread that I think can guide us in our lives as parents, as teachers, and simply as human beings, which, as we've learned, is not so simple. And that thread is empathy. Empathy in Judaism asks us to notice what is happening inside another person without being swallowed up by their feelings. It asks us to recognize their individuality without trying to reshape them into our own image. And this is one of the most difficult spiritual practices in all of life, particularly in Jewish life. But it's also the foundation of all healthy relationships. The first half of Toldot of this parsha gives us a painful example of empathy gone missing. As I mentioned, the Torah tells us that even before birth, Jacob and Esau struggled with their mother, or within their mother, I should say. Rebekah senses that something unusual is happening inside of her, and she seeks out God. And she receives a prophecy. She hears God's voice that her children will be very different and that the older will serve the younger. Yet once the boys are born, the text offers no evidence that either parent pays any attention to the striking individuality of their sons. The voice from the heavens tells her that they will be different, and the parents raise them as though they were exactly the same. Now, Esau grows up to be a hunter, guided by instinct, intuition, and his physicality. He's a person of action and of appetite. And Jacob grows into a quiet thinker, someone drawn to a more reflective life inside the tent. These differences, they're not subtle differences. They are woven into the very nature of these two young men. And yet the Torah tells us something troubling. It goes on to tell us that Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating the game that Esau would bring him. That love is the root of Isaac's appetite, not of Esau's essence. And that Rebekah gravitated towards Jacob, whose temperament mirrors her own. Their paternal connections reflect their own preferences, where they see themselves in their children rather than their child's needs. In a home where two boys require two different forms of care, attention, and guidance, neither receives it. A recipe for disaster. This is one of the earliest examples in our tradition of that one-style-fits-all parenting, which, if you've ever parented, you know, does not work. It is presented to us not as a model to follow, but as a cautionary tale. A parent who does not recognize a child's inner world cannot guide them in this world. A teacher who assumes all students learn the same way will lose the attention of those whose learning flows differently. And a leader who ignores the complexity of human diversity will fail the people that they serve. This is the Torah's earliest lesson in empathy. Empathy is not pity. Empathy is not indulgence. Empathy is the determined effort to understand another person's reality. It is seeing the child standing in front of us rather than the child that we might have imagined. Without that, Jacob and Esau become strangers, and their estrangement grows into deceit, and then resentment, and then a family fracture that lasts 20 years. The Torah does not tell us this story to shame Isaac and Rebekah. It tells us the story because they are us. Isaac and Rebekah are every parent that struggles with this, every human being, because every parent knows what it is like to misread a child. And every teacher has met a student whose nature does not match their expectations. And every family knows that pain can grow when understanding is thin. The power of this story is that it does not end in tragedy. It ends in reconciliation and hope. When Jacob returns home many years later, something inside him has changed. He has been wounded and humbled by life. He has wrestled with angels through the night with a mysterious stranger, and he has learned that blessings are not possessions, but responsibilities. And Esau has changed too. The text gives us no insight into his inner world, but his actions, they speak clearly. He runs towards Jacob in that moment of reconciliation. He embraces him, he falls on his neck, and he kisses him, his brother. And these gestures reveal a man who has released those earlier resentments from childhood, a man who was hard and has softened. Jacob responds with words that have echoed throughout Jewish history. He says to his brother, in that moment of reconciliation, a moment imbued with fear that it's going to become violent, he says to his brother, "Seeing your face is like seeing the face of God." It's a profound moment of empathy. Jacob looks at the brother that he once feared, and he sees instead something holy in him. He sees Esau not as a rival, not as a threat, but as a person who has carried his own burdens, who has grown in his own way and has suffered in his own silence. And this reunion is not only the resolution of a family conflict, it is a master class in empathy restored. Two men, they were boys, and now they're men, shaped by their own stories. They learn to see each other again, or maybe for the first time. They reclaim a relationship that was broken by a lack of understanding in childhood by their very own parents. Toldot invites us to learn from both halves of the story. The empathy that was missing in the beginning leads to pain, but the empathy that reappears in the end leads to healing. Loving someone requires seeing them. Guiding someone requires understanding them. And parenting and teaching asks us to walk a delicate line between support and challenge, between listening and leading. Judaism holds this balance as a sacred practice. Jewish education is rooted in this kind of balanced empathy. The Talmud teaches that a parent must teach a child Torah, a trade, and how to swim. Because swimming is more than a physical act. It symbolizes the capacity to face deep and rough waters and to trust one's own strength. Children develop that confidence not through pressure, but through presence, through adults who recognize them as individuals and give them what they need to thrive. Jewish education is always aimed for more than academic knowledge. It asks, who is this child becoming? What spiritual muscles need to be developed? How can we help them understand themselves and respond to the world with compassion and clarity? That is the goal of a moral education. That is the goal of Jewish education. And that is why Jewish learning matters at every age. It shapes identity, it shapes values, it shapes purpose and vision. It teaches us that the world cries out for people who can notice brokenness and take responsibility for repair. It teaches empathy that is grounded and strong. This kind of educational vision requires steady leadership. And so tonight, as we celebrate Noah's bar mitzvah, I also want to acknowledge the work of his mom, Jen Jaffe. Noah's mom, but our educator and school principal. Jen guides our school with thoughtfulness and integrity. She helps create an environment where each child is known, where differences are welcomed, where learning is rooted in curiosity, and where teachers approach their students with empathy that is balanced and wise. She works closely with families, she strengthens our faculty, and she helps our children experience Judaism as something that they can walk with throughout their lives. And while doing this, she is also completing her master's degree in Jewish education at HUC. Where do you find the time? Because he's traveling a lot. But this pursuit for Jen is not academic alone. It enriches our community. We benefit from it. And deepens the quality of learning for all of our children that they receive from her and her teachers. So tonight's a good moment to recognize that devotion and express to you, Jen, and you, Joel, our gratitude. And tonight we celebrate Noah, who brings thoughtfulness and openness and sincerity to his learning and his skating. He approaches ideas with curiosity and has taken his preparation seriously. The empathy that he shows towards others reflects the environment and family in which he has been raised. Loving parents, Jen and Joel, who act with tireless intention toward all of their children, and all of the teachers who have guided Noah and many others. Noah's Torah portion reminds him that relationships require work and patience and honesty and the courage to see others as they are. And Jen and Joel have modeled that for their children and for all of our children here at Temple Shalom. And for that, on this Shabbat of gratitude and blessing, we are deeply blessed and tremendously grateful for this family and the wisdom of our tradition. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to turn to page 586. We'll rise for Elena.